welcome to the show. So today's episode was driven by a concern of mine. When we want to get our bodies in shape, we get a trainer. When we want to start a business, we get mentors. Meanwhile, our mind is our power, but we don't always put in the work and get support to take care of our mental wellness. It's time to change that. The topic of today's show is everybody needs a therapist because we are all going through something. And psychologist Dr. Tobias is here to help us understand the first steps to take in minding our minds. Dr. Tobias, thank you for being here with me.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure to be here.
And I know we have a limited amount of time, and this is such an important and deep topic. And so I said the best way to use the time is to at least just get those first steps started.
Okay.
So I first wanted to help the folks at home understand what is therapy. And I found this quote that similar to what I was saying in the open, a therapist is like a physical trainer, but for the mind. So what is the role of a therapist, and who would you say therapy is for?
The interesting thing, the role of the therapist is to go on the journey with the client and observe with the client what they see, get their feedback. So the therapist doesn't go ahead of the client. There are things that we see, but many times the client isn't ready to see it. And so we walk alongside them in a non-judgmental, accepting manner, and we build trust. And when the trust is established, that's when the growth begins.
And so the therapist just helps us to navigate that journey to that growth.
Yeah, the first thing that I ask is, what brought you here today? And usually what brought them to the session is not the real issue, because what you're being triggered by, why you're so angry, many times it has nothing to do with what happened here, but it's something that happened a long time ago. So whenever we have a very intense response to a situation, know that more than likely your reaction didn't start here. That was a wound that was opened up. And so when they come in, often they don't realize that. So we start where they are and we move toward the wound.
Would you say that the wound is the root?
Let me put it this way. The way that I talk about development of personality. When you were in utero, all things with everything perfect, you were floating in this wonderful warm place. You didn't have to breathe for yourself. You didn't have to poop. You didn't have to do any of those things. And then you go through the trauma of birth, which is, if you've ever seen a birth. Now, I'd had 2 children before I saw a birth, and I was like, yikes, I don't want to do that. Well, I'd already had 2 children.
Right.
But at any rate, once you are born, that's when reality hits you, okay? From that point on, you get cues from the environment to tell you what you should do to get your needs met. So we all develop a personality structure. That personality structure, it isn't just the way I am. It's the way I learned to be. And a part of that learning to be occurred when you did not get your needs met. And so you learn to manipulate the world so that you can get your needs met. A lot of times the way that we manipulate the world leads us to not get our needs met. It leads us to be angry in relationships. It leads us to wall people off, not let people get too close. Sometimes it leads us to getting close to people too quickly, because those needs were not met early on. So when I talk about triggers and all of that, I'm really talking about what happens in the brain that says you're in danger. Did I answer your question? I'm not sure.
You did, and it leads to my next one. So once we realize that we have that starting point of figuring out the wound, or for those who like the word, the root, there's two types of care. There's, of course, when you look at self-care, there's the mental illness piece and mental wellness piece. And I think we get caught in the stigma of if I have to go in for my mind, then that just means that something's wrong. But it's like whether you're getting treatment for either or, it's treatment. I wanted to ask you, So in starting from that space, because sometimes we may not know what we're going through. I've got relatives who deal, you know, with mental illness. I think everybody needs to be concerned about mental wellness. Absolutely. If you think about it, it's all encompassing. Yes. Are there signs that we can look for that cues us to know it's time for me to check in with myself and also get that support? I like that word support from somebody who understands what I'm going through.
Right. And the difference between mental health and mental illness. I think that as people of color, and we are targeting people of color, that most of us have been traumatized either in our lifetime or through the epigenetic principles. There are genes in us that come from slavery. And so we are a very hardy people, but we also are wounded. We're wounded people. So what are the signs that you may see? Can't get out of bed in the morning, can't focus, just not enthusiastic about life. There are things that you used to do that you don't enjoy doing anymore. Sometimes you can't sleep at night. Sometimes you're eating too much. Sometimes you're not eating enough. So there could be any number of issues that come up. But one of the things that I have found, particularly with men, the reason why most men come into therapy is because their partner told them, you must get into treatment.
It's an instruction versus a choice?
It is. It's usually a demand instead of a choice, and then they come in, and I've worked with lots of African American men. Once they get in and they realize this is judgment-free zone, then all of their stuff comes out. One gentleman told me, he said, Dr. Tobias, I feel like I'm always behind enemy lines. I never forgot that. He said, he was a CPA, he said, when I go to work, I feel that way, but when I go home, I feel that way. I always feel as if I'm behind enemy lines. And so why do they come in? Women will go in for mental health care. Men typically don't go in unless either the court tells them they have to or their partner tells them that they have to, or there's been a major crisis in their work.
This is very important. I think that's a great place to pause. More with Dr. Tobias right after this.
Can't be afraid, no. I gotta say what I mean and I won't say, yeah. Gotta do it my way. Ooh.
If you love them enough to suck the snot out of their nose at 4 a.m., then surely you'll check nhtsa.gov/the right seat to make sure they're in the right car seat.
Can't be afraid, no. I gotta say what I mean and I won't say, yeah. Gotta do it my way. Ooh,
we're back with Dr. Barbara Tobias talking about the importance of mental care. Now, Dr. Tobias, when we left off, you were sharing with us different reasons why people go into therapists and kind of what drives them there. I'll be transparent. I think this episode was very important to me, and we talked about this when we first met. I decided to get into cognitive behavioral therapy. I was just in love with the idea of like retraining the brain, because I feel like so many people, we live and we die not knowing exactly what's up there, the power of our minds, not knowing the parts of the minds and the circuits that the mind takes in thinking processes. And I was thinking, if we could learn that, how much more power can we have over our behaviors, over our responses to things? And I've been doing it about 3 weeks and I'm seeing a difference. And I was like, you know, it's exciting to me. So I was telling you, I go to work and I'm out and I'm like, everybody get a therapist. You know, like we all need one. It's the best thing, because you have someone like yourself whose focus, and calling, as we were saying earlier, is to focus on this interconnection that's happening within us. And so I wanted to do a little bit of talk around cognitive behavioral therapy. Can you help the folks at home kind of understand what it is?
Absolutely. I used to teach this. It's my specialty. So cognitive behavioral therapy is really helping people to recognize that the events that happen in your life are neutral. They're neutral. They have no meaning accept the belief that you have. So cognitive behavioral therapy is as easy as ABC. There's the activating event, that's a neutral event, has no meaning except the meaning that you make of it. There's the belief that you have about that event, and as a result of that, you have a consequence, which is an emotional response and a behavioral response. Most people don't even think about what the belief is. The only way that they know that they reacted to this event is because they're angry. Are you following me? A, B, C.
Yep.
So they're angry, they're acting out, they're pulling back, but they can't tell you what the belief was about the thing that just happened. Can I give you an example?
Please do.
Okay, and this is personal, and because I believe in being transparent. Everybody needs a therapist. I have my therapist that I've had since 1998.
Love it.
And I
Yes.
tell her, you may go on vacation in August because I'm accustomed to that.
Okay.
And I mean, she answers my calls. She's gotten me through really terrible things. So I went through a very traumatic experience. I actually lost my son. He was 28. And, you know, I remember the day I was on my way teaching at Howard University. And so that was the event, which anybody would say is a horrible event. You're absolutely right. My belief was that I would precede my children in death. And children should never die before their parents would die. And so as a result of that, the tears, the crying, the shutting down, unable to function. And so I went through the grieving process. I went to a homicide support group. I really worked through that thing. So that happened in 2002. What belief do I have about this now? I still know that I miss my son, but I also am very spiritual. And I know that there was a reason and a purpose for that loss. What is my belief? Any pain that I go through is pain that I need to experience, because when I'm in treatment with you and you come to me and you tell me something that is really painful, I feel it. I get it.
Yeah.
And so I'm able to use even the worst experience in my life so that my behavior now is, how can I help you get through this? And I tell you, I've talked to patients who have been in the hospital handcuffed, young men, and I have, where they're, you know, pushed back, and I tell them, I lost my son. I don't want that to see that happen to you.
That consequence.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they open up.
Yeah.
And so when you look at ABC, the example that I gave you,
Yes.
the activating event was horrendous loss that I thought I would never go through. But you know what I did? Bad things happen to everybody.
Yeah.
Why not you?
You know, they're giving us a cue for time, and I think that's the perfect place for this first segment. We're going to have to bring you back, and this has been good for those first steps, but I'll have you give the folks at home one last thought, and if you can make it short and sweet for me when it comes to connecting with a therapist.
Okay. The most important thing for you to do is first talk to the therapist by telephone. Go to that first meeting with the mindset that we have to connect.
Okay.
And if there's no connection, there will not be good therapy.
So look for the connection.
Exactly. You want to look for the credentials and all of that, but make sure there's a connection.
We got you.
Okay.
Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.
Can't be afraid, no. I gotta say what I mean and I won't say